Well, Alex, it says we're live. So we're going to play the music and we're going to go live here. But I need to get the music in here for when we post this as a podcast. So stand by. All right, welcome in to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I don't know what happened there. Hit go live, just stalled out, and then we were live. So here we are, Monday edition of the Fantasy Basketball Pod. A lot to get to today, Alex. Busy weekend, of course, in the NBA. Every weekend's a busy weekend at this point. But we like to recap the waiver wire. And if you're in a daily moves league, talk about some guys who might still be out there in a lot of your leagues. And we had ourselves a week in the RotoWire Stake League. I think some teams, myself included, starting to feel the pressure, trying to get those ads in for the final few weeks of the season. And we had some big ones. I thought for sure, Alex, I was going to get at least one of Jonas Valanciunas or Zach Collins. I got neither. Our guy, Kyrian Sprecher, got them both. He beat me by, I think, $1 with his bid for Valanciunas. I initially had like $30 and I was like, oh, that's way too much. I can't be the guy who's like paying $20 more. And then I bumped it down to like 29, 27, 26. I think I finally bid at 24. And of course he goes for 25, but Valanciunas obviously for at least a week going to be a huge pickup. And I would not be surprised if this Sabonis injury lingers further.
Well, Kyrian was not messing around. He got Valanciunas, Zach Collins, and Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah.
So that's a clean sweep right there. Yeah, I mean the Sabonis injury was officially a week out, but I don't know. I mean, they're in a position where they might actually have to try to get him back soon. I feel like 9 times out of 10 when we talk about injuries on this show or just in the NBA, we're like, no reason to rush him back. It's the middle of the season, or no reason to rush him back. They're gonna make the playoffs. But it's like, actually, this time around, Sacramento may need to try to get him back on the court kind of quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's certainly something that once he's ready, he's going to be out there. I just, this doesn't happen very often to Sabonis. I mean, part of the reason that he's so valuable in fantasy is he doesn't miss time. Like I'm trying to find some edges to bet this Kings Mavs game tonight, and it's just hard to find like a representative sample of like, all right, how did it look last time Sabonis was out? He's only missed a couple of games this season. I will say I did discover Zach LaVine is the guy who seems to benefit most, scoring and rebounding wise without Sabonis. You mentioned Zach Collins. That was the other big one. He continues to play really well. Jalen Smith was even back for the last 2 games over the weekend. We still saw Zach Collins start. We still saw him play big minutes. I think both of these guys, there's a timeline, right? Like you're not necessarily looking at just starting them the rest of the way. We'll see on Vucevic, but the Bulls did already say they're hoping to get him back later this week for their road trip. So looking at the Bulls schedule, they're off tonight. They play home against Cleveland on Tuesday. Sounds like Vucevic will almost certainly miss that game. But the messaging, at least from Chicago, is that they expect him back Thursday at Orlando or Saturday at Miami. The Bulls are, record-wise, a team that you would say, oh, why would they rush him back? But yet again, I think they sense an opportunity to make the play-in. So I don't see Vucevic necessarily being shut down. I don't think we can operate like that.
Yeah, and I mean, Collins is capable enough of playing power forward if they really want him out there. So I think even if you add Zach Collins and Vooch comes back, I don't think you're suddenly going to get zeros out of Collins because, I mean, I would assume Vooch just got ruled out for the season. He needs surgery on his shoulder. And then this last game that they played, which was against, who'd they just play? Indiana?
Yeah.
Like, Julian Phillips played 20 minutes. Dalen Terry played 20 minutes. Talen Horton-Tucker, Javon Carter each played 15 minutes. Like, should those guys really be playing over Zach Collins or Jalen Smith at the 4, who you just traded for Zach Collins, even when Vucevic is back?
Probably not. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how they view Zach Collins. Like, is he still young enough that you want to see what's there? To me, not really. I mean, he's bounced around to a few teams now. Like he pretty much always does this when the minutes are there. It's not like this is coming out of nowhere. You just need that opportunity to open up. But yeah, interesting stuff from our guy Kyrian, grabbing Olynyk as well. I threw in a keep him honest bid on Olynyk, but what worried me is that he rested for a game this past week. I believe it was on a back-to-back. But I would not be surprised, if that's the case going forward. Like New Orleans they can't make the Chicago case, right? It's like they're so out of it that I don't think there's any like push to the finish here. CJ McCollum rested last week too. That is a big concern for Team Whalen in the Stake League. Going to need him to not do that the rest of the way. But those were the big three in that league. Like you said, Kyrian paid 10 for Olynyk, 25 for Collins, and 25 for Valanciunas. There was a bidding war for Davion Mitchell as well. Alex, I did win that one. I ended up parting ways with Jordan Clarkson, who is resting yet again tonight. I want no part of the Utah Jazz going forward. Paid $8 for Mitchell. Felt okay about that. Most of the other bids were in the $2 to $4 range. You got to be realistic, right? I mean, he's been playing a lot of minutes. The stats are going to come and go, but I finally parted ways with Terry Rozier this week. I will not be picking him back up no matter what. I don't care what happens the rest of the way. But you look at Davion Mitchell, I mean, essentially since coming over to Miami, he started every game. He's played exactly 37 minutes in 3 straight.
Yeah, his shooting percentage is higher than it's going to be. But if you're just rostering him, like we're in a 16-team league, if you need the assists and the steals, he's going to give those to you if he's going to continue to play minutes like 35 plus. I mean, per 36 minutes this season, across the whole year, Miami and Toronto averages 6.3 assists and 1.1 steals. And I think the steals can actually increase. I think Miami will just ask him to just be as aggressive as possible because they don't really need his offense. But decent pickup for a 16-teamer.
And he has 3 consecutive 4-game weeks coming up. This is a weekly lineup league. You got to lock everything in on Monday. So obviously trying to maximize games played, getting a guy on a team that has something to play for the rest of the way. One common thread with a lot of my drops is like, I'm just getting rid of guys who are on teams that just don't feel like they're trying anymore. So, again, got to be realistic on the upside with Davion Mitchell, but excited to fire him up this week. I also added Richaun Holmes, Alex, a guy that you put a bid in. I barely clipped you. Got him for $5. You had a $4 bid in there.
Holmes, I think he was on the Friday waiver wire show. Was one of the guys we suggested, as was Olynyk. I don't really know what the plan is with Alex Sarr. Right. He missed 3 straight. He came back for the most recent game, but I think you have to be encouraged that Alex Sarr came back, played 26 minutes, and Richaun Holmes played 22 minutes. He's just the backup 5 is Richaun Holmes. So, and we know who he is at this point, right? He is the ultimate, like, a per minute big man is Richaun Holmes. So pick him up, man.
I have a big decision. I have to start a wizard this week because I'm not starting Fred VanVleet. Do I start Holmes or do I start Kispert? I mean, just a total dice roll.
I think it's whatever stats you need, right?
I need them both. I need blocks. I need rebounds. I need threes. I need points.
I think Kispert's technically been playing like hotter. Like he's had some games where he's like 21 points, 25 points, 4 assists. But I think that's a toss up.
I think Holmes has a higher floor, because it really depends on like, okay, are Smart and Middleton out there? How much is that cutting into Kispert's workload? Like part of the reason that I liked Holmes this week is he's not missed a game since January 25th. Like he's been excluded from these rest days that you often see with the Wizards and other bad teams. So yeah, I mean, just can't wait to get Richaun Holmes in the lineup. It is a 3-game week for the Wizards, so relatively low upside, but they have a bunch of 4-game weeks coming up after that. Other notable additions, James Anderson, who's doing well in this league. He picked up Killian Hayes. We saw Andre Drummond added after a thrilling bidding war. Cason Wallace was picked up. Aaron Nesmith was picked up. Bryce Sensabaugh, Moses Brown. Did you actually end up making any additions here or in any of your other important leagues?
I got shut out in the stake league. I checked this morning, like right before the pod. I was like, all right, who'd I get? Nobody. I could have probably been more aggressive, but I don't have like a ton of fab to work with. But yeah, this week I got on my bench. Everybody has that red O symbol on there. It's one of those weeks. It's Vucevic, D'Lo, Tobias Harris, Noah Clowney, and Brandon Ingram. And honestly, I really thought about dropping D'Lo, Clowney, and Ingram. I'm just like, what am I doing here? Do I really need these guys? Like, who's going to pick them up and going to win the league because I dropped Noah Clowney? So next week might be a full just like I'm getting rid of everybody that's not playing, and I'm making some final moves for the stretch run here.
Got a good question in the chat here from Manila Most Wanted. He said, how do we assess the AD injury? Is dropping him reasonable if my playoffs run until March 23rd? So we're basically talking 3 weeks. He said, tough call. He just went to Dallas Ball and looked healthy. This is very, very difficult because even if if you can just kind of make it through the first round and Davis comes back next week, maybe, He will be reevaluated at the end of this week. So Friday, he's set to be reevaluated. They play Memphis that night. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily realistic that he'll play this week. I guess technically maybe he could play on Sunday the 9th against Phoenix. Oh man, I would be terrified to drop him, just knowing that even if you can just get like, 4 or 5 games at the end of the playoffs out of him, that could be huge. But you also have to remember that there could be a, kind of a reintegration here where he's not just coming back and playing 38 minutes right away.
Yeah, he'll probably be slow out of the gate. They also have what looks like 3 back-to-backs the rest of the year. They have a back-to-back next week. They have a back-to-back near the end of March, and then a back-to-back at the start of April.
Yeah.
I know you said your playoff run's March 23rd, so you may not be affected by that, but you're in a really tough spot. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you could try to trade him, but I don't know what you're necessarily going to get from anybody else. They probably feel the same way as you do.
Yeah, similar situation with Fred VanVleet. Christian Rogers asks about him. He says, "Good afternoon, fellas. Thoughts on VanVleet? I think I'm ready to press the panic button regarding his ankle." Button's been pressed for me with Fred VanVleet. This has been just brutal timing, with him missing time, with Giannis missing some time around that same stretch. So he missed 11 games in a row, came back against Sacramento the other night, played 35 minutes, but then after the game was like, yeah, I got stepped on like immediately and re-injured the ankle. So we already know he's not going to play tonight against OKC. I don't get the sense that this will be another, 3-week long absence necessarily, but really tough schedule here because they're playing a road back-to-back. So at OKC tonight, at Indiana tomorrow, off Wednesday, and then at New Orleans. So 3 road games in 4 nights. They're then home for New Orleans on Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised if he misses this week. I don't know. It's too early to say, of course, but again, I don't. My hope is that it's not as bad as we're just back to square one and you're resetting the clock for another 20 days. But again, if you're in a weekly lineup league, like I don't think you can put him out there this week.
Definitely can't put him out there this week in a weekly lineup. I wouldn't hate dropping him. Kind of depends on what size your league is, but at the same time, this on the season he's ranked like 72nd in 8 cat, and he's averaging 32 fantasy points per game, which is certainly above like the minimum threshold that you'd want on like a 12-teamer. But we're in that point in the season where there are a lot of streaming options available, a lot. So if you feel like you have to drop him, I understand that.
As we speak, by the way, I just got a notification that Davion Mitchell is now questionable for tonight. So just love to see that. Please, Davion Mitchell, battle through this. Looking at last night's slate, Alex, we won't spend too much time, turning back the clock. Saw Boston take care of business against Denver, coming off of that crazy loss to Cleveland on Friday. Cavaliers needed overtime, but ended up beating the Blazers 133-129. Orlando continues to slide. Phoenix, another just ultra depressing home loss last night to the Timberwolves. But the LA Lakers sweeping the Clippers this weekend, Alex. I thought for sure this would be a rest spot, one of these 2 games for either Luka or LeBron. The lines were a little wonky, but the Lakers just keep pushing, man. And like, you almost have to watch the games to understand how they're doing this, because I think if you just follow like the general narratives, or you're watching SportsCenter, you're thinking like, oh, Luka Doncic is just carrying this team and they're just, they're blowing teams out of the water offensively. Like that's not the case. Like since Luka joined the Lakers, they're 22nd in offensive rating. Like Luka's turning it over a ton. LeBron's turning it over a ton. Like they've been efficient. They're shooting a lot more threes offensively, which I don't think is a coincidence. Going small, having another passer out there in Luka, but it's still the defense that is winning these games.
Yeah, I also thought there'd be a rest spot. I think it was the first game of the series. The Clippers were like 5-point favorites on the road, and I'm like, are LeBron and Doncic sitting for this game? But you're right. It is one of those things where you don't quite like. JJ Redick is playing this defensive scheme, which is very, I don't even know if aggressive is the right way to put it, but they load up on the ball handler. So like whoever's guarding the ball handler, another guy from the wing will just press up and basically try to prevent the drive and be in the passing lane at the same time to the guy in the wing. So if like Harden, for example, is basically being double teamed to the top of the 3-point line, tries to make the pass to the guy in the left wing. He can't make a hard bounce pass or a hard chest pass to the guy. He has to lob it over the second defender. And then the guy in the corner, the defender who's guarding 2 guys, has time to run over because the pass is a lob and then someone backfills. It's like it's very schemy. And they do a lot of off-ball switching where like LeBron and Doncic always like stay back on off-ball switches, and it's working so far. I don't know how other teams are gonna have to start taking advantage of this, because they, like, when their best lineup is out there, LeBron and Doncic and Reeves are essentially all average defenders at best, if not below average on aggregate. Yeah. So they only have two good defenders out there the entire time. So I think maybe we'll see sort of a teams figure this out a bit. But as of right now, it's and they're not even playing that well offensively, like you mentioned. Like that's going to pick up too.
And Austin Reeves didn't even play last night. Yeah. Day to day, by the way, for Austin Reeves, doesn't look like anything too serious with that calf, but teams do tend to be cautious with that specific injury. Lakers are home for the Pelicans on Tuesday night. Big stretch of schedule coming up, though. Home for the Knicks on Thursday. That is going to be a banger. And then at the Boston Celtics on Saturday night. They play Milwaukee twice this month. They play Denver twice later in the month. So still a lot of big games coming up for LA, but 18-4 straight up in their last 22. We're going to get some questions in the chat in a moment. But first, we got a message from our sponsors, Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Well, if you have, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost: $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, sweeps. Deposit $25, you get $25, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. It's compatible right now for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Go to edgeboost.bet right now. Use our promo code ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD. That is promo code ROTOPOD at edgeboost.bet. We're also brought to you by Pool Genius. You want to win more in your golf or football or March Madness pools? Those are coming up. Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools. With Pool Genius, users win 3 times more often than expected. And RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers over at Pool Genius. You can go to poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or you can start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. All right, let's see what we got going on in the chat. The Intrepid Cephalopod is weighed in, Alex. He says, hey, guys, I'm feeling Machiavellic today. Okay. Any late playoff IL dice rolls you'd recommend if I'm up in the standings? He said he just stashed Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford in advance of the coming update on those two. Any other players you would consider? Evil laugh. I think you're muted, pal.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm pulling up our injury report page on RotoWire to see who's got a return date of late March.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do this, but we got DeAndre Ayton is out there. I don't know if he was dropped in your league. That's something to consider. Part of me thinks he won't come back though. I think you got everyone, honestly, that unless you think like Jovic is coming back from a broken hand. I think you got the names, man.
I mean, would you throw Brandon Ingram in that category?
As a person who has Brandon Ingram in their IR, I suppose you could, but he's day to day. They have no incentive to bring him back. I would think, I'd be sure if you want, but don't. I have way less confidence in him coming back than I would in Derek Lively returning April 1st.
All right. Joseph Kim says, how are we feeling about Norm Powell's injury? Powell left last night, did not return. Said playoffs start week 21. It's a shallow league with big rosters, 15 guys a team. Doesn't necessarily fit my build. He's soft punting threes and free throws. Is he droppable?
I would definitely try to trade him first because he's basically a top 50 fantasy player. The problem is it's a hamstring injury. Those usually take a while, or the player comes back too soon and then they pull him again, and you're really risking that. So I would try to trade him first. It'd be really hard for me to drop him.
Yeah, I mean, they're calling it hamstring soreness for now. Could be a strain. We'll see. We should get something, I would think, in the next 24 hours. Worth noting too that he was missing time before that with a knee issue, so it doesn't appear to be related. I think there's a reasonable chance that he only misses a couple games. Like maybe this ends up being 2 or 3 weeks. Who knows? In that case, obviously, then you consider dropping him. But I would try to make a trade now, maybe before that news comes out, and then you're kind of covered both ways. All right, Kool-Aid Trippin says, would you drop Donovan Clingan, who has a 3-game week, for Davion Sharpe, who's on a 5-game week in week 19 of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. If you're just going, if you want to go week by week and try to win your playoff matchup, that 2 extra games is, I think it's worth it, because Clingan is good, right? But he does not have that long of a leash right now, and he fouls all the time. Like I watched the first like 16 minutes of that Cleveland game. I apparently saw like all of Donovan Clingan play in that game because he just fouled out. So I don't hate that move.
Yeah, I mean, my concern would be there's 2 back-to-backs in that 5-game week. There has to be mathematically for the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, not that Davion Sharpe, I guess, would be the guy that you're most worried about, but I wouldn't take it as gospel necessarily that you could just count on that rotation for all 5 games. But either way, we're talking about a 5-game week versus a 3-game week, and a guy who, like you said, continues to foul at a crazy rate. So I don't think that's a crazy question at all. I think I would consider that. Conversely, Justin asked, is it time to drop Chris Paul for Donovan Clingan? Says, I think it might be over for Unk. He's in a points league.
Yeah, man, Chris Paul's been pretty, like his past 11 games, 6.8 points on 38% from the field for 23 fantasy points, also 7 assists. So yeah, I mean, he'll play better than this, but his shot volume is just way down. And that's the real problem here, because they're essentially done for the year, right? I mean, the Spurs as a team. So yeah, I'd be fine doing that move, dropping him for Clingan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we just talked about Clingan's issues, but I think you look at yesterday against Cleveland, that's like the bottom 1% outcome. He plays 11 minutes and fouls out, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. Like, he still put up reasonable numbers given the restrictions. First game he was in the starting lineup after the Ayton injury, 17 points, 20 rebounds, 3 blocks. That's like the 99 percentile outcome. So if you just take his averages since he has been starting, we're only talking 21 minutes per game, 8.5 points, 9 rebounds, 1.6 blocks. I think I would take that chance. I mean, Chris Paul, I think he's really hurt by the Wembanyama absence. The assists have still kind of been there, but De'Aaron Fox has just taken over. If you watch the Spurs, like Fox and Castle just run everything for them now. Like even Vassell feels really marginalized.
Castle's the man, dude. I could not believe how in Yahoo leagues Castle was like 40% rostered.
Really?
We talked about it on Friday. I'm like, are like, why? Because but that's kind of I understand, because it's kind of been the way that it is with Castle. Like, he'll have 3 bad games and people are like, it's over. He's a bum. Like, this rookie class is terrible, and so is Castle. But his past 3 games, he's averaging 26, 6, and 5 with 1.3 steals. It's like you said, his usage is through the roof right now.
I think he's close to locking up Rookie of the Year. I think when you're talking about Jalen Wells being the alternative, like, nothing against Jalen Wells, but because of the lack of name value, he's going to have to pry that away from Stephon Castle, who, doesn't sound like he's not Zion Williamson, but he's got some notoriety. And even last night's game, it's like Jalen Wells has not had a game like that all year. So, and no surprise that I think he's moved to like minus 175 in the Rookie of the Year market. All right. Are we projecting the Sabonis injury for more than a week? And if that's the case, will Keon Ellis become a must roster?
So officially he's out for a week. Are we projecting it for more than a week? I could see it. Just because it's a hamstring strain. Now it's a grade 1, which is basically your lowest level. But yeah, like Nick and I talked about at the top of the pod, it's a debate of like they kind of need him there because they're trying to hang on to a 9 or 10 spot in the West. But in terms of will Keon Ellis be a must roster player, I think they'll just play Valanciunas like 26 to 30 minutes a game. Backfill with Trey Lyles and Labissiere, who they just signed, which I can't believe.
Love it.
That's a throwback from like 2016 fantasy basketball. So I don't really think Keon Ellis becomes that much more of a either minutes or usage guy for them.
Yeah, and they have a natural pivot all of a sudden in Valanciunas, you know? So I don't think you're looking to backfill all that much from the guard spot. I mean, you could still Ellis is playing enough minutes. He's giving you enough steals and some threes that it's still not crazy to want to go pick him up. It's like it doesn't hurt him necessarily, but I wouldn't be looking at him at the top of the list of guys who benefit here. Better to roster Aaron Nesmith or Keldon Johnson for week 19 of the playoffs?
Well, Keldon Johnson finally had his first he remembered he's Keldon Johnson game and took 5 shot attempts and had 7 points, although he still shot well from the field. I shouldn't tell him, sorry. He had 7, 6, and 5. But for week 19 playoffs, to me, this would be game count. I don't know how you feel about this. If I don't know if you have the games playing in front of you. I don't have the schedule.
I'm working to confirm 4 games for both.
I don't know. Do you have a preference on this? To me, it's pretty close.
Very close. Very, very close. It is a 12-team 9-cat as well, if that matters. I don't know, man. I think the ceiling is a little bit higher for Keldon Johnson. Nesmith has the potential, I think, to give you a little more defensively, maybe to give you those splashier games from 3. Like you're looking at a max of like 2 made threes for Keldon Johnson, whereas Nesmith could get hot and hit 4 or 5 in a game. So I would really try to parse it out category by category. What are you prioritizing? What do you have a better chance to win in that given week? But those are really close. All right, James Chan says, lunch lady, Kelly Olynyk and Jonas Valanciunas rest of season. So we'll do an either or, I guess. Who would you rather have?
Rest of season Olynyk, I think, because this Valanciunas thing, I mean, best case scenario, but like it could just be a week. I mean, you could get like 4 games out of Valanciunas, and yeah, maybe Olynyk gets like a sort of a shutdown. I guess that's also possible. But as of right now, I would say Olynyk is projected to be more relevant for the rest of the year than Valanciunas is.
Yeah, I would still brace maybe for some rest on and off, just like, because of what we mentioned earlier in the show with Olynyk sitting on a back-to-back, season's over. But yeah, I think there's a very reasonable chance that Sabonis is back at the very least within 2 weeks, if not 1 week. So I think you have to take that into consideration as the hammer here. Mr. Salty Brick says, are Clingan, Grimes, and Zach Collins all holds in a 14-team 9-cat league?
Yeah, I mean, Grimes had 2 bad games. One of those was a decimating blowout loss at the hands of the Chicago Bulls, of all teams. But then he responded a couple days ago with 44 points. And he's played pretty well in general since coming over to Philly. I would prefer to hold Grimes. We've talked about Clingan a lot. I think that's just if you need blocks and rebounds. Otherwise, the ups and downs are hard to go through. And then Zach Collins, we also kind of talked about where you're taking a risk once Valanciunas comes back. Or excuse me, once Vucevic comes back. I still think personally that Collins could still play 22 to 25 minutes a game with Vucevic there, but we haven't really seen that.
All right, Joseph Kim asks, do you think Santi Aldama could move into the starting lineup, especially down the stretch? Of course, this happened the other night against the Spurs. They lost that game, but Aldama put up 15, 8, and 11 with a block and a steal. He played 37 minutes in that game. So that's one thing. But he's been playing enough minutes off the bench that I don't know if he needs to start. I still remain very interested either way.
Yeah, I mean, last night, or 2 nights ago, Bane and Morant were out. Brandon Clark didn't play. Vince Williams didn't play.
Right.
So I would not bank on Aldama because I think he's just in such a groove coming off the bench. I doubt they want to disrupt that, and really they don't need his offense. I mean, at the end of the day, he's more of an offensive player, and in the starting lineup, you already have Morant, Bane, Jaren Jackson.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right, good question here from James. He says, is Kevin Huerter worth a pickup now with Ayo Dosunmu done for the season? This is a 14-team 10-cat league.
I actually have this is a Blue Sky post right in front of me that popped up in my feed coincidentally that says, Billy Donovan says Kevin Huerter is still struggling cutting and changing direction.
Oh, okay.
So no, do not pick him up.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't play yesterday. He's questionable for their next game. Who do they play next? They are home against the Cavs tomorrow. Not a great update. It doesn't mean he's done for the year, but yeah, in the short term, I think you probably back off here. It is a 3-game week coming up anyway.
I mean,
for the
it's
Chicago Bulls.
they diagnosed it as a knee sprain, which
Mm.
was and it's just they don't have any incentive, and I wouldn't mess with that right now. I know Dosunmu is out, but
okay. Is Jeremy Sochan a must roster for the rest of the season in a 12-team league?
I think he's pretty borderline because he'll have those great games where he'll have his 17-4-4 and his 18-11-3, which are his last 2 games. But then he'll also play 19 minutes and have like 4-8-3. So I think that's kind of take it or leave it.
All right, Hooks and Hoops with a Z says, I won my league last year, so everyone is now hesitant to do deals with me. Have you ever experienced this?
I don't know because I think in our leagues, like there aren't that many. I've done a couple deals in our stake league, which is a redraft. I haven't done any deals this year, but I've done a couple in the past. And then the league that we're in that has the most deals is our keeper league.
Right.
And I think that's a pretty easy format to get deals done because there's always some, I'm tanking, I'm going for it. The deals are almost never like equal. There's always like some weight in. Everyone's got their own opinions about how players are going to turn out over the next 3 to 5 years. I don't feel like people are specifically avoiding me to do deals with, though. I get trade offers all the time, actually.
Right. Well, I think the problem is we play in a lot of industry leagues, so like everybody's pretty dialed in. I don't think anybody's like, don't trade with Nick Whalen. That's the guy that drafted Fred VanVleet. You don't want to get anything done with him. This definitely has happened to me though in like home leagues, just because people know what I do for a living and they're suspicious. And it happens in the draft too, where they're like, oh, Nick took that guy. He must be really good. It's like, believe me, pal, I've got plenty of misses. There's no reason to believe that anything that I'm doing is gospel. Joseph Kim, he says, all right, last week, Rudy Gobert's update was that he is without a timetable, but progressing. Are we worried about his rest of season value? And also, do you think Scoot will ever slide into the starting lineup this season? Let's tackle Gobert first. I mean, another situation where we just don't have much info. It doesn't seem to be progressing really all that quickly. I know he was away from the team, dealing with a back issue. I get the sense that it's just one of those things that, it sounded like he just kind of, I don't know if he tweaked it in game. I don't think he did. I think he just kind of woke up and had a back problem, over like right before the All-Star break. And you just kind of have to wait until that heals. I'm not going to compare myself to an NBA player. I've dealt with a lot of back issues, and there's been times where I'm like, this is going to go on forever. And then you wake up one morning and you're like, somehow I'm totally fine. And then you're good for like 6 months. So I don't know if that's how it could be with Gobert, but there hasn't really been any indication that he's close. Like, teams aren't practicing that much this time of year, but we haven't even gotten that. They kind of gave an update on him and Randall over the weekend, and they were, a lot more positive about Randall, who ended up playing last night against the Suns. So, I mean, I have Gobert in the stake league. It's killing me in terms of blocks and rebounds and field goal percentage, but I'm not anticipating starting him this week. I don't anticipate him playing tomorrow against Philly. And they start the week with a back-to-back, so like even in the off chance that he would somehow be ready to go tomorrow, like he's almost certainly not playing on the back-to-back.
Not playing on the back-to-back. You would think with a back injury too, it's one of those, you ease him in, you bring him off the bench, you play him 18 minutes, see how he feels, that kind of a thing. So yeah, unfortunately we don't have too many insights. Like that's the thing, you have to like risk reward, do some risk reward management on your own end, because we can't.
Yeah.
We all have different opinions about that. We don't have any more insight, unfortunately. Like some guys' injuries, like the Huerter thing, I can be like, Nick and I have looked at enough injury reports and read enough wording to know, like, if a guy can't cut and he can't change direction, he's at least like a week or 2 away.
Yeah.
I guess to pivot to Scoot, will he eventually start the season? My guess would actually be no, unless Jeremy Grant becomes done for the year and they move Avdia up and then they, that sort of a thing, which certainly possible. But I think right now it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, you take Scoot's past 15 games, he's playing 27 minutes a game anyway, averaging 14 and 5, still shooting 40% from 3, by the way. So I don't think it matters too much for his rest of the season outlook.
All right. I want to acknowledge this question from Hooks and Hoops. Not going to come up with some names on the spot, but we will file this away for a later episode. He asked, who are the top 5 fantasy players of all time, specific era included? For example, Harden in Houston. That's a great one. I don't know if maybe you happen to have a list in front of you, Alex, but I would have to do some more research on that.
I am like 95% sure that during COVID, when we were trying to figure out ideas for content, that we wrote like a best fantasy basketball players of all time article. I can try to I can try to fire that up but I feel like we did that because we do on RotoWire have historical fantasy rankings. So
Right.
you can go on our website, go to rankings, and look up from previous seasons. You can go all the way back to 2010, 11.
Yeah.
I know there's other sites that have that as well.
I mean, like modern day Jokic is definitely up there. Like he is
Yeah.
significantly more valuable than the number 1 player was in 2010 or 2011. I can tell you that. Durant obviously at his peak, Curry at his peak, like peak LeBron was up there, but he wasn't because of the free throw percentage mostly. And, relatively low volume threes compared to guys like Curry and Harden, was never like all world in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I feel like peak Houston Harden that year that he averaged 36 a game. I mean, that was one of the all timers, and certainly what we've seen from Jokic the last couple of years has been up there.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time finding this article. Maybe
Maybe it was a
I don't know.
podcast.
Maybe it was a
I don't know.
podcast.
We'll circle back on that one at some point. Ben Mathurin update. Should I pick him up and wait and see? He is considered day to day, but Rick Carlisle did say, I think that was on Friday, that Mathurin will be, quote, shut down for a couple games at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more insight than that. I think it's going to be at least a couple days. We'll see. I mean, his playing time had been decreasing anyway with the rise of Nesmith. So I don't hate the idea of picking up and seeing, but I wouldn't drop anybody that that you like on your team.
All right, we'll hit a couple more, and then we'll be on our way. A couple guys we've talked about already, Alex, but a good head-to-head here. Zach Collins or Richaun Holmes, rest of season?
Wow. Do you have a strong opinion on this? Because I view these guys pretty closely for the rest of the year.
It 100% depends on Vucevic, because if there were to be a shutdown, if that injury were to linger beyond this week, which again, if you're just tuning in, that the Bulls have signaled that they hope to have him back at some point later this week. If Vucevic is out, it's for sure Zach Collins for me, because they seem to prefer him over Jalen Smith, whereas Holmes is still coming off the bench behind Sarr. But even so, I mean, I think if you assume that Vucevic is back this week and Zach Collins is the backup center and Holmes is the backup center in Washington, man, I don't know. I don't know. I still think I would lean Zach Collins. I guess, if you're making a decision like this, you're shooting for the true upside, and I guess to me that's still Collins.
Probably still Collins. Because of the potential that he is able to play alongside Vucevic.
All right, here's a good one. Monk or Poole, 12-team 9-cat league. We'll take this as another rest of season. Two very, very comparable players. They, over the last month, so we're talking like somewhere between 12 and 15 games for most teams, they are 53rd and 55th, respectively.
I think I would take Monk. I don't know if Poole's a shutdown risk, but it's enough where if we're talking about a tiebreaker, I would just rather have Monk.
Yeah, kind of bad timing for Poole too. He's out tonight with an elbow injury, hyperextended right elbow, by the way. So that seemed like something that could be multiple games. So I would monitor that. We've talked a lot about Zach Collins, but Jalen Smith, Alex, is he a pickup in a 12-team league?
Definitely not a must roster player. Because when in his return, he was the backup to Zach Collins and played 18 minutes, and I would not consider him a must roster in 12 teamers.
Kevin asked about Collin Sexton. He is questionable for tonight. He's in a 12-team Yahoo league. Sexton was dropped. Should he pick him up? It's going to be dicey. Collin Sexton has played 17 minutes since February 3rd. Obviously dealt with an injury. For the most part, he has kind of dodged the shutdowns. Like he wasn't shut down until the final 4 games of last year. Like they've for whatever reason, they focus more on Kessler, Markkanen, Collins, and Clarkson in terms of the shutdowns. Like you'd think Sexton would be more a part of that group than the Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowskis of the world. So that makes this one really difficult.
I would not. Yeah, I'd be comfortable dropping my worst bench player for him, no
Yeah.
question. Maybe my second worst bench player, but I don't think I would. I'm not sure I would go any farther than that because I am
Yeah.
worried about like that he just never comes back, even though he's technically questionable tonight. If does he come back and then does he play more than 1 out of every 2 games?
Yeah. I mean, he played over the weekend, sat their last game yesterday, and then, again, could play tonight. We'll see. I would be surprised if he doesn't play again. It more so maybe this is like, are you in a weekly or daily lineups league? Because weekly, this is going to get really dicey. They have a bunch of back-to-backs later this month. If you're in a daily lineups league, I think it's totally worth it to take a flyer and just get him in there while you can. All right, that'll put a bow on it. Good stuff as always, Alex. I want to congratulate you officially, by the way. Totally forgot to do this at the top of the show, bringing home the FSWA award for best fantasy podcast. So you've been a big part of that,
We
as has
both
our
did
entire
it,
team. Yeah, well, yeah,
the Monday pod,
yeah. Well, the whole team deserves recognition. Mike Barner, Kirian Sprecher, Ken Kreitz, Brandon Kravitz, Shannon McEwen. Another great year for us here on the pod, and we did officially, I think, submit one of our episodes on Monday, which means that we got a lot of great questions. So the listeners, the viewers on YouTube, you guys deserve a lot of the credit for that as well. You basically carry the entire pod. You give us great questions. We get to talk about them and answer them for a half hour every Monday. Always one of the highlights. So thank you very much for that. And congrats to our whole team on bringing home that FSWA award. All right, that will actually do it. I will be back on Wednesday night. Will be the Nick and Brandon pod this week as we continue to shuffle that thing around each week. We'll have Mike and Kirian coming at you later this week as well. And then the usual Friday waiver wire episode with Alex, Ken, and Shannon coming your way on Friday.